doing so would mean that we will be stripping the presidency of its powers, while the parties are still engaged in internecine battles of their own, with none able to win a parliamentary majority to govern. We must avoid a situation where we end up with a president who has no powers to govern and a parliamentary system that cannot govern. But even as we try to focus our attention to building the future state and refocus the world's attention to Yemen's other priorities, we must not forget that the security issue will continue to haunt Yemen for as long as the source of strength of terrorism is not being attacked. And nothing gives more strength or apparent legitimacy to terrorism than a society where there is a large gap between the haves and the have-nots, with the middle class virtually non-existent. Add to that a government that deliberately ignored the welfare of its population in an attempt at weakening the society into submission. 12 years since 9/11, the world is still engaged in the war on terror without an end in sight. Clearly, there is an argument for a strategic review of a war that has lasted as long as this one. In Yemen, villages have been attacked and sometimes occupied without the inhabitants joining the fight to defend their villages. This war has been seen as a war between a regime that does not represent the people, supported and armed by a world power that has sustained the regime's existence, and a terrorist group that fights both. This has been the view of the Yemeni population, which has been economically and socially marginalized. For long, Yemen has had no stakeholders, only stockholders. On the other hand, the terrorist groups, presenting themselves as liberators and freedom fighters, find ready recruits among our youth, many of whom are in the street without jobs, without schooling, without hope. Unless we initiate programs that attack this source of terrorist strength and addresses our weaknesses, this war on terror promises to continue long after we are all gone. And the only programs that have any chance of succeeding are those that improve education, create jobs and other economic opportunities for people to improve the quality of their lives. We need to give our people something to be proud of and defend. A qualitative and dignified way of life for our youth to hold on to and defend against terrorism in their villages and towns. Not only has the former regime's mismanagement of the country promoted terrorism, it has also split the country and threatens to break it apart, with the South demanding disengagement, which the former regime called secession. I do not wish to be drawn into a debate on semantics, but in response to the former regime's terminology, I will argue here that the secessionists are not those who are in the South, but those whose mismanagement of the country made its people despise the Union and wish to disengage themselves. These are the real secessionists. Indeed, the call was not originally aimed at disengaging from the country, but from the Saleh regime. Now that the regime has fallen, the call for disengagement has become meaningless, except within the context of restructuring the Union from its current full but failed merger into a federation between two or more states. Whatever the formula, it must take into account the wishes and aspirations of the people of the South, and must also right the many wrongs committed against the South during the Saleh regime. We cannot move properly into the future unless we are able to lift ourselves from ourselves at least the most significant burdens of the past. And this will be one of the big challenges faced by the national reconciliation effort. This is also perhaps one of the most crucial aspects that will determine the future course of our country. It is also an area where pressure from the regional and international community must be brought to bear, especially on foreign-based former Yemeni politicians, who should now be induced to give the country and its future leaders an opportunity to clean up the mess they created over many years. On the economic front, going forward, we will not seek support by charity and donations. Charity is something those who have no capability ask for. A corrupt system relies on charity, most of which is siphoned. In the Yemen we seek to build, our call will be for partnerships with the rest of the world. We will tell the world, come to Yemen, invest in our country, benefit from our country, and be our partners in success. We do not need or want charity. What we need is partnerships. Yemen is not constrained in potential opportunities and possibilities. The constraint is in resources. Those who bring resources will reap the benefits Yemen has to offer, and will find Yemen is ready and willing to be partners. Unlike the coup d'etats of the past, the revolution of 2011 is real and grassroots. It is a change demanded by the people. There can be no power stronger than that. We have not only demolished fear, but also are in the process of demolishing an entire system that was based on corruption, mismanagement, and nepotism. We are replacing all that with institutions of governance, transparency, the rule of law, freedom of the press, and civil liberties. The Yemen of the future will not be governed by the whims of individuals, but by institutions of governance, the Constitution and the electorate. We are reforming our military from one that is led by political warlords into a professional army whose role is to defend the nation alone, with no political affiliations and no domestic role. Never again will we suffer to see our sons and daughters of the military turning their guns towards one another and turned into fodder for the political ambitions of warlords or political parties. Saleh regularly claimed that the military is the nation's safety valve. This claim displays a total lack of understanding of the role institutions play in governance. A nation's safety valve is the Constitution, free parliament, independent judiciary, and a free press, not the military, which has no domestic role. What Saleh meant was that the military is his personal safety valve. It is to avoid such abuse of the military that the military must be constitutionally transformed into an unpoliticized professional army with allegiance to the nation alone, not the ruling party. Yemen's future military must be under civilian leadership. The position of defense minister, like all cabinet posts, is a political position. Having a military minister of defense is tantamount to conceding that the military has a political role to play in the country. We have seen the result of that. The military and all other similar institutions must have civilian oversight with democratic checks and balances. Yemen cannot afford political party card holding military commanders. The flag of Yemen is the army's only party card. Certainly the military should not be allowed to become the president's personal army or safety valve. In a speech a few days ago, the president, Abdurrabbu Mansour Hadi, made important commitments. He admitted that the past dogma of an army that protects the ruling party is a thing of the past. The new army must be a professional and well-trained fighting force to defend the nation. He committed himself to creating a unified command for our army, to replace the politicized and divided commands. We must support and continue to put pressure to ensure that these commitments are met. We must work to ensure that the hills and mountains of our cities are not used as missile and rocket launching bases aimed at our towns and neighborhoods. Never again should we tolerate the bombings we saw targeted at the protest grounds and neighborhoods of Taiz, Aden, Arhab, and Sana'a, even as the civilian population kept their personal weapons tightly at home in their determination to proceed with the revolution without violence. While disarming the population is an imperative for Yemen's future, the conditions precedent